Hey everyone, Chris Carter from the Locked On Steelers podcast, and it is crossover Thursday. So we've got Jake Arthur from the Locked On Colts podcast. We're going to break down this upcoming Steelers-Colts matchup. I'm going to lead off talking about how good this defense has been and how much better I still think it can be in this upcoming matchup about the Colts. We'll get his thoughts on what's going on with Anthony Richardson, who leads the NFL in interceptions, what the Steelers need to do to get more of those, all that here and more from the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks sponsors our crossover Thursday episodes. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5 more on them later. All right, Steelers fans, it's crossover Thursday, which means we get into our preview talk. We start talking with the person who covers the opposing team for the week this week. That is the Colts, and that's Jake Arthur from the Locked On Colts podcast. And right now, the Colts are coming off of a really hard-fought win against the Bears. But Anthony Richardson is the quarterback that leads the NFL in interceptions. The Colts are also dead last in time of possession. I think that that is a major point of contention for the Steelers to attack this team the way that they are built to attack. And I think it's also a big chance for this defense to show how really elite it can be against an offense like this. How do they do that? We get into that with this first segment here with Jake Arthur. Check it out.
We're talking the rise of Justin Fields. We're talking a potential rebound of Anthony Richardson, and we're talking what it's going to take for either side to win, really. So, Chris, I'm dying to know more about Pittsburgh because I think they're fascinating. Off to a great start, obviously 3-0 behind Justin Fields, who has had obviously a rocky start to his career, but seems to be thriving a bit under Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. So, offensively, defensively, what are we looking at storyline-wise here for the Steelers?
Well, I think offensively, everyone kind of knows the deal right now. It's Justin Fields' show until they decide it's not. Russell Wilson's been dealing with a calf injury that has lingered since really the start of training camp. It looked like it healed at the start of this, right before the start of the season. And then the week one, he injured it on Wednesday, and then they had to kind of adapt the plan for the Falcons. And since then, he hasn't been back. So the Steelers have been leaning on Justin Fields at the quarterback position, but they're not asking him to do too much. Like in the Steelers offense, Justin Fields is more of a game manager that can make big plays. He had a 55-yard touchdown pass. He's been able to use his legs to make plays. They're not asking him to just distribute the football, but this team is still very much led by its defense, and that is going to be the biggest factor in this game. I think is going to be a defense that going into this week ranks number 1 in points allowed, number 1 in yards allowed, number 1 in first downs allowed, number 1 in rushing touchdowns allowed, and is doing so without even creating an insane rate of turnovers. They have decent turnovers. I think they have 5 on the season so far, and I think that's tied. That's up there among the best. But you look at teams like the Packers that have like 9 turnovers right now. Sometimes that's not as sustainable, but what this Steelers team I think has done a really good job of is they've been able to win so many possession downs and do a great job also setting up better possession downs. They're stuffing the run very well. They're taking away passing lanes. They're making it tough on opponents to find open shots. And oftentimes the 2 touchdowns they've allowed this year have been because of busted coverages. And it's just been like one here, one there. But, when they make that mistake, they clean it up. I mean, last week against the Los Angeles Chargers, they allowed -5 yards in the second half. That's what this team's – that's the thing. Like, they get after it. Cam Heyward is back to full strength. T.J. Watt is still T.J. Watt. And the emergence of Nick Herbig, second-year Wisconsin edge rusher, has been remarkable. He had 2 sacks last week. He's going to start this game while Alex Highsmith's hurt, and the Steelers feel very confident about that. Patrick Queen and the linebackers. I can go on and on, but it's this defense that's defining this team right now. The offense is sort of doing the last part to just get them over the hump, but the defense is doing the bulk of the work.
Yeah, I'm super interested to see how the Colts attack this? Because it feels like just a much better version of what they saw with Green Bay. I mean, with Green Bay, they had Malik Willis, but Matt LaFleur put on a masterclass of, I mean, kind of similar skill sets with Willis and Fields, but Fields obviously being, you can credit him with being a better, more explosive player. But I kind of asked Shane Steichen this today as well. Like, the Colts saw Justin Fields with Chicago last summer, but obviously they're kind of facing a different beast now. Like, you obviously were familiar with what happened then and what's going on now. How are they just like catering to him perfectly to really just, I was kind of wondering have they just kind of reset him back to basic and said, you mentioned they're not asking him to do too much. Are they just kind of taking him back to zero and letting him regrow? Is that kind of how it's going?
I think in a way you could say that's a way to describe it. I think part of it is they're saying, hey, this team is built to win with either you or Russell Wilson in at quarterback. The key thing is don't turn the ball over and throw it to where the defense isn't, and let everyone else do their jobs. And Justin Fields has done that. And on occasion, hey, you might need to step and make a play because this is football and you do need quarterbacks to do that on occasion. But don't step too far outside of those responsibilities. Don't reach too far out. I do think they simplified things. Like, for example, just look at how the Bears played the Colts just last week. Where Justin Fields is from. Caleb Williams threw 52 times in that game. Did have 2 touchdowns, but also threw 2 interceptions. But ultimately, they scored 16 points with 52 passing attempts. The Steelers scored 20 points last week with Justin Fields managing the game, and they could have scored 27, and they just chose to take a knee at the 1-yard line at the end of the game when they were just basically pummeling the Chargers at the end of the game. I think that's where the thing is for Justin Fields. He knows, hey, this offensive line is young, and they love what they're seeing out of him. Broderick Jones had a really good game last week. Zach Frazier's had a fantastic start to his NFL career at center. This is a group that they're looking. Najee Harris, Cordell Patterson running hard. They're hoping to get Jalen Warren back soon. This is a group that's like, yeah, they're not going to ask him to throw 50 times unless the game gets way out of hand. But if it's another 16-21 type of score like it was last week for the Colts and a 20-10 type of score like it was last week for the Steelers, he's not throwing 50 times. He's not throwing 40 times. You'll be lucky if he throws 25 times. They're going to try to conserve drives, win the time of possession. Right now, the Steelers are second in time of possession in the NFL, and that is absolutely by design. It's to possess the football, keep the defense fresh, and limit the opportunities for the opposing offense to keep getting back on the field and figure something out.
Obviously, the Colts are last in that department. Every game, it's just been, unable to sustain drives and kind of hit the layups on offense. They've really had to lean on the run game, especially the last couple of weeks. How defensively for the Colts, they finally stood up and just didn't get punched in the mouth on the run game, but it was against the Bears, who's arguably the worst rushing offense in the league. This is different with Pittsburgh. How is Pittsburgh's rushing attack? Like, do you think they're able to win just about any matchup? Are they more middle of the road? Or I'd have to think they still have the advantage in this one over the Colts.
They're still figuring it out is the correct answer. Broderick Jones, for example, was their first-round pick last year. They traded up to get him. Last season, when he took over in the mid part of the season, Jake, he became a starter by like week 9. Up until that point, they were in the bottom quadrant of the league in running the football. In the second half of that season, they were the number 2 rushing team in the NFL. This year, though, Broderick Jones hurt his elbow in training camp, and in doing so, he really wasn't getting a good punch off. I did film studies on this. Like, all of a sudden, he couldn't throw his hands, and he was kind of letting guys get on his chest. And then last week, on the first play of the game where the offense is on the field, he lines up with Joey Bosa, and he just punches right into his chest and then pancakes him, and Joey Bosa had to come out the game because he got hurt on the play. And all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, where'd that come from? And it looks like Broderick Jones might have gotten his arms back, and that might be huge. But meanwhile, Zach Frazier is playing very well at center. James Daniels been solid at guard, and they're hoping to get Isaac Seumalo, who is their best offensive lineman, back at left guard this week. But to answer your question fully, this offensive line is still figuring things out. Like, you go back and you look at how last week played out for the Steelers. You look at the final stat line, you see, oh, they ran the ball all right. They ran the ball for like 114 yards, but a lot of that came in the fourth quarter when the Chargers were worn down, and that was the whole plan of win the time of possession game, keep grinding at these guys, and eventually that defense is going to crack, and they did that. If the Colts come out and they give an initial, like, good, solid start to the game and stopping the run, it is going to be their mission to do that for 60 minutes. The Steelers are just going to keep grinding away at you and grinding away at you. And if you start to drop your guard, if you start to get tired, that's what they want. And that's where the Steelers run game is this year so far. That's where it has clicked the most, is when it's been able to wear you down and all of a sudden your defense is huffing and puffing and the Steelers offensive line is rolling on them.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be the first mission for the Colts defense. I mean, they had the solid performance last week, but they cannot afford to be complacent. They were so bad the first couple weeks, they have no room to be complacent, because it's one big win for them against the worst rushing attack in the league. So coming up, guys, here in a moment, we're going to talk about, what are some big things to look at for the Colts. It's really a team that we just kind of have not figured out yet. And you guys, the summer is winding down, but that doesn't mean that your favorite live events are something that you got to kind of throw in the rear view. Sure, the outdoor venues might be closing down a little bit, but there's still plenty of concerts and comedy and shoot Broadway shows and all that kind of stuff you might want to go to. For me personally, since COVID and all that, I stopped going to a lot of shows, but this has kind of been my resurgence into that. My wife and I have gone to a bunch of live events this year. And GameTime is definitely one of the biggest catalysts to helping us do that. I've recommended to several friends as well, go on to GameTime and get the hookup, because they just really have the best deals looking around. You don't have a million of the hidden fees and everything that you do with some of these other ticketing sites. They've got their seat views where you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. So, not every venue has seats that are awesome. Sometimes you might be stuck behind a pillar, or, you're on the almost kind of like a baseline view and it's just not good. They've got the lowest price guarantee, where they'll credit you 110% of the difference if you find a better price with comparable seats. That's how confident they are that you won't find anything better. And then they've got the GameTime ticketing coverage, which is great for parents. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry, because life happens. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time.
Now back to Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We get into more of the Colts side of things as Jake explains what they've got going on and what they have to focus on to get the win this week. Here's Crossover Thursday.
All right, so when I look at this Colts team, I see them up against a 3-0 team like the Steelers, and it gives me a little hesitance to have some optimism, because they are coming off a big win against the Bears, but the Bears had a lot of issues. And the Colts, I think before you can be confident really projecting them, they have to find some sort of consistency anywhere. The first 2 weeks compared to last week, it's just so Jekyll and Hyde. And it obviously starts with Anthony Richardson. We've seen the Colts put about every different kind of product on the field so far, offensively and defensively. Week 1, they couldn't do anything except for rely on Anthony Richardson's big plays. He had the 2 50-plus yard plays, the touchdowns. Week 2 against Green Bay, it got pretty sticky. It's hard to say really anything was going right. The run game got going, but then in the fourth quarter, Jonathan Taylor saw exactly 0 snaps, and he was kind of the hero for them going into the fourth quarter, and then didn't play. And then last week, everything for the team really was working except for Anthony Richardson. So offensively, they've got to find an identity. They've got to find consistency. Anthony Richardson cannot be so boom or bust. We're kind of having some similar arguments with Anthony Richardson as we were when Carson Wentz was here in 2021. There's a whole thing about make the layups. Like, sure, you can hit the logo 3 like Steph Curry, but you got to make the layups too. Anthony's accuracy when it comes to just like the simple chain moving out routes and just the things that veteran quarterbacks just can do in their sleep, it's just not there for him. He kind of gets too hyper and excited and will sail balls he doesn't really step into throws, and he kind of, fades a little bit. Like he literally like fades away when he's throwing. So fundamentally, he's got to be better for this offense to have any sort of rhythm. It's kind of a direct correlation to why they're so low in time of possession. It's pretty normal this season to see the opponent have 40 minutes and them only have 20. So the run game, if it's able to be established at all against Pittsburgh, that'll definitely help. Personally, I think if the Colts kind of took an approach that the Steelers have with Justin Fields, things would go a lot better. But it's also up to Anthony to kind of make those short throws. Obviously, a huge discrepancy. Justin Fields is completing like 70% of his throws, and then Anthony's, they're around 50. So very curious how Pittsburgh defensively is going to show them, because obviously you mentioned at the top, TJ Watt's TJ Watt. Right. Herbig is stepping in well for, Highsmith, who's now out. But it doesn't seem like there's like a huge weak point with Pittsburgh. The run game doing well, pass game doing well, third down doing well. So I'm just I think Anthony Richardson is going to have to do some of the special things that only him and a handful of other guys can do to really be the difference in whether or not they can score enough points.
The weakness that I think you're looking for there, Jake, is you want to put this Steelers team behind the 8 ball. You want to make them have to come back from a decent sized lead. And that's the thing is, that hasn't happened yet. I mean, it's just week 3. Eventually, it's probably going to happen at some point this season, as it does to everybody. But put this offense in a situation where it has to score multiple touchdowns to put itself back in the game, and put this defense in a situation where they can't anticipate what you're doing because you can run the ball or throw the ball because you're up. That to me is a big key that the Colts need to get into. But I guess I redirect to you for a second here. I look at Anthony Richardson. And, obviously a lot of raw talent, a lot of amazing athleticism here. But, I see 6 interceptions, most in the NFL. And when you look at how teams are approaching him, teams aren't even blitzing him right now. He has 83 dropbacks on the season. Of those 83, he's only been blitzed 11 of those times. He's not been blitzed 72 of those times. And 4 of those 6 interceptions are coming when he's not being blitzed. That is not a good sign for going up against the Steelers team, because this Steelers defense, they're not trying to blitz you a whole lot. They love to just send 4 and let 7 defenders work in coverage and keep it going. And they also are very used to playing against fast, big, mobile quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson. And that's not to say that they're perfect against guys like that. Josh Allen has had his way with the Steelers defense once or twice, but this is also a different Steelers defense than they've had for some time, because Cam Heyward's healthy. He wasn't last year. TJ Watt's healthy. He wasn't 2 years ago. Keanu Benton has really emerged as an interior presence next to Cam Heyward, on top of Larry Ogunjobi as a good answer there. The corners are solid in Joey Porter Jr. and Dante Jackson. Now, if one of them goes down, that'll be an issue because their top backup got put on IR this week. But then you got, Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, and Landon Roberts at linebacker. They're happy about those. And Deshaun Elliott and DeMonte KZ as your safeties behind Minkah Fitzpatrick. So, like you said, if you look at this defense, the one part where you circling like maybe we can get at this guy is Beanie Bishop, the undrafted free agent rookie from out of West Virginia who plays in the slot. But even he's been okay. And that's the thing. Like, if you're the Colts, you have to find a way to make life easier on Anthony Richardson. Maybe it's leaning on Jonathan Taylor. You know what? If Quentin Nelson comes out and has a great game, and then this offensive line just moves people and they create space and they set a tone like that, that might be your biggest thing, because then you are forcing the Steelers to play not on their terms if you can build a lead that way. But if you come out and you don't build a lead and you let this game stay close, that's playing right into the hands of the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's exactly what they want to do. They win rock fight. Mike Tomlin has the best record of 1-score games in the past 5-6 years, or maybe even since he's been in the league. It's what he does. And especially since Ben Roethlisberger fell out of his prime, say in 2018 or so, that's how the Steelers have basically won all of their football games.
Yeah, the Colts are kind of built the same way. They cannot come back from those big scores. And we talked about last week with the Bears, they had to get on the board early and establish Jonathan Taylor early to allow Anthony Richardson to not be too reliant on him. And you had mentioned, some blown coverages for Pittsburgh has led to touchdowns. I think they'll kind of be, you can't be reliant on that, but hopeful for that, because Alec Pierce and his huge plays, that's been a big deal for them this year. You know, week 1, he had 2 of them. He had a 44-yard catch last week. So they are kind of reliant on those, which is, unfortunately, you can never forecast that. They had, you know, a blocked punt deep in their opponent's own territory a couple weeks ago. So it's stuff that's kind of catching lightning in a bottle and kind of, you could say, lucky. But yeah, I think the only thing you can say with confidence they have to do is get Jonathan Taylor going, or, you know, we've kind of talked about Anthony Richardson needing to be more involved in the run game as well, because it does feel like he's being intentional about not being just the running quarterback. Like, there are times he's getting close to the line of scrimmage and has a ton of green in front of him, but he's still throwing the ball, which, you know, if he's hitting the guy accurately, that's fine. But it led to a couple interceptions. You know, I think his worst one last week was to open up the second half. He was running up to the line of scrimmage, and he found Michael Pittman, I think it was about 15 or so yards downfield, and just floated it way over his head right into the arms of the defender. And it's like, man, you probably could have picked up at least 10 yards just running it there. So I don't know if he's just kind of being intentional about not running all the time until it's crunch time and they need him to do it. But there's just some things he's got to change. You had mentioned the interceptions and leading the league. The first couple weeks, they weren't necessarily bad reads. They were just bad throws. But last week, they were dumb throws. Just
I saw the one in the end zone, and I was like, oh, boy.
Yeah. Like, he could have just thrown it over the top of the end zone and gotten rid of it. And then last week, again, just a bad throw to Pittman to open up the second half. Again, it could have gone well. It could have been a chunk play for them if he would have just delivered it accurately. But yeah, he's just made some really poor throws and a couple bad decisions that have led to those. And then fumbles as well. When we're talking about ball security, he has got to learn to tuck the ball. Like, there was one play he got kind of bailed out. The officials ruled his forward progress down when he was getting sacked, but he fumbled that ball and the opponent picked it up. So he kind of got bailed out there, but that's something. He doesn't get sacked a lot, but when you're facing like a TJ Watt, someone who knows how to get that ball out, like, I think that's going to be a big X factor.
I think it is too. I think you look at the Steelers and the way they want to get after the quarterback. And what's crazy is TJ Watt. He's gotten a sack in each game. You know, he's had a few more than a couple sacks called back already, but he hasn't had that TJ Watt completely destroy your soul type of game where he gets like 3 sacks and an interception and then do all that. And if the Colts aren't careful and you put Anthony Richardson in some predictable situations, the Steelers know how to make life harder on athletic quarterbacks. They know how to get after guys, especially young guys. I would, if I'm the Colts, I'm doing everything to keep Anthony Richardson from predictable passing situations as much as I can this game.
That is beautiful foreshadowing for a point I'm going to make here in segment 3. We're going to talk about, you know, what's the biggest things that each side has to do to actually win this one. Hey, NFL fans, you guys can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page when you're placing your bets. You can kind of just use it as your own little betting hub. This week, FanDuel has the Steelers as 1.5-point favorites with a total point over-under of 39.5. From the Colts side of this, seems very similar to last week, but even a more low-scoring affair. And it all really checked out pretty similar. So, you know, when you look at those, you consider what you're looking at. Go ahead and get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet on FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com.
Welcome back, everyone. Chris Carter here from Locked On Steelers as we continue Crossover Thursday, and we get into each team giving their 3 keys to the game. I'll talk about the Steelers. Jake will talk about the Colts. You'll see that these two kind of match up pretty well with each other. Take a listen right here on Crossover Thursday.
Welcome back to Crossover Thursday, which is presented by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, Chris. So Steelers, the 3 biggest factors to them winning this game, what are they?
I think there's a few things you want to look at here. One, you've got to be able to take away Jonathan Taylor. You take away Jonathan Taylor and you make this about Anthony Richardson, you're putting this into the hands of the style of defense that you want to play in this game, because if the Steelers stuff the run, it forces Richardson in more predictable situations, and it allows the defense to pin their ears back. They'll get after the quarterback. And make no mistake, it's not just Watton and Herbig on the edges. It's also Heyward. It's also, and they might throw a pass rush in there a couple times from their off-ball linebackers, Patrick Queen and Landon Roberts, Peyton Wilson. They're all very good at that. But if they stuff the run and they let those guys pin their ear backs, that'll be step number one to setting the tone to the game that you want to do. On the flip side, if they get the run going and they make it about Najee Harris and about Cordero Patterson and Jaylen Warren running the ball, Colts are going to be in for a long day, because like you said, the Colts have the worst time of possession in the league. The Steelers have the second best. That will put this script right in line for exactly what the Steelers want to do in this game. They want to tire you out. And if the Steelers get it going early on the ground, that's going to make it even worse when it's later in the game and the Colts are trying to figure things out and they're tired, while the Steelers have been playing at their pace. So I look at that. But one matchup in particular, if I'm going to be looking at that too, is also when it gets to those predictable situations, even less about Anthony Richardson. The Colts, I love their playmakers. Jonathan Taylor out of the backfield, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, I covered him in the ACC, Alec Pierce. All of those guys can be dynamic and can break games open. The Steelers need their off-ball, their corners, their safeties, their off-ball linebackers to all help and try to limit those guys from making plays after the catch. Make Anthony Richardson have to check the ball down, but when he does, get to those guys, tackle them short of the sticks, play your style of football. Like you said, if Anthony Richardson can hit on some big plays to some of these guys, and let's be real, these guys all have those big play abilities. Pierce has shown it, Pittman's shown it in years past. Josh Downs has the speed to get there. Those are the things that can break the game open and make this not about the script that the Steelers want to write for this game. So if you're looking at things, stuff the run. Do not let Jonathan Taylor take over. Establish the run early yourself, and don't let these big playmakers be big playmakers.
Yeah, I'd have to say kind of a similar approach for the Colts. So things they've absolutely got to do. They have to get Jonathan Taylor going, or just some sort of heartbeat in the run game. That could even be an Anthony Richardson game, but they're not going to win if they are one-dimensional, just passing the ball with Anthony Richardson. That's going to be a huge problem. So they've got to get Jonathan Taylor involved, and I think they got to get points on the board early, because we obviously talked about neither of these teams is really built to play from behind. So doing that, last week certainly helped in a game against the Bears, but the Steelers aren't going to pass the ball 50 times.
No.
So I would also, you just know that like TJ Watt is going to get his. The pass rush from Pittsburgh, they're going to at minimum get pressures. Something that's pretty not great to start out the week is Braden Smith, the Colts right tackle, who would be largely tasked with going against TJ Watt, did not practice today with a knee. It's a knee that bothered him like all of last year. He missed like all of the offseason with it. He's been playing, and he's been playing lights out this year. But that's, it's a knee that's given him problems in the past. So the guy you're really going to be relying on to, take up Pittsburgh's best defensive player, that could be a tough one. So if you can capitalize on that with like some screens in that area, or just, designing some things to capitalize on that, it's going to happen. So, get Anthony out on boots, get him out where you're moving the pocket and not making it so easy, making him a sitting duck. And then on the defensive side of the ball, for a week and a half now, they've done a really good job against the run. I think they're going to have to do that because, again, if you force Justin Fields to play from behind and have to throw a bit more, this is a group that can take the ball away. I mean, Kenny Moore, Julian Blackmon are their biggest defensive playmakers. Jalen Jones had 2 interceptions last week. Mm-hmm. These guys can take the ball away if you're going to make Justin Fields throw. And obviously from his time with the Bears, he was constantly pummeled. If he could just keep pressure on him and also stop the run, that defensive front, they've been very reliant on good play from them. And I think they're going to have to show up and do it again. I mean, it's not exactly fair that every game is going to have to be so dependent on them, but this is another one.
No, I agree. It's one of those games where you want to make the game dependent on the quarterbacks on both teams. Like that's the thing is that, neither team has the established quarterback that's so well rooted in their system, like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or one of those type of guys, where if you make the game about them, they're still going to hurt you. But at the same time, you also have to not let them get the layup touchdowns. Like last week, the Steelers, Justin Herbert threw a touchdown, but it was on a busted coverage play where Minka Fitzpatrick, thought something was called, and Joey Porter Jr. went one way, he went the other, and then that led to an open guy. Similarly to Kirk Cousins, that Kyle Pitts just kind of floated to the end zone when Beanie Bishop didn't run with him in his zone, and that was a little bit of a breakdown. But again, if I'm pointing at things that the Steelers have done wrong, they've done about 100 times more things right that have allowed them to be the number one defense through 3 weeks. So, I think this game is going to come down to, a very classic game of football. Don't make mistakes. Don't turn the ball over. Control the line of scrimmage. You do that on either side, you win. I think that the Steelers one particular player-to-player matchup that I'm loving to see here, Jake, is Cam Heyward versus Quentin Nelson, because we've seen these guys tussle before. We've seen Cam Heyward get the best of him. Last year, I think Nelson got the best of him in return because, Heyward was coming off an injury. But now you have a fresh Cam Heyward who's been playing very well. You have a fresh Quentin Nelson who's graded extremely highly by Pro Football Focus this year. I want to see those two dudes go at it all game long. And the stuff like that can set a tone. If Nelson's able to neutralize the Steelers' big man in the middle of the defense, well, then all of a sudden, maybe that sparks some momentum. But in reverse, if the Steelers, if Cam Heyward is moving Quentin Nelson around and he's winning that spot in the line of scrimmage, that's going to set a tone that allows the Steelers defense to play downhill, aggressive, and maybe they're setting the tone. So again, tone setting, physicality. If you love old school football, turn this one on Sunday. It's going to be a fun one.
That matchup has been a really good. Obviously, the Colts and Steelers seem to play all the time, but Heyward and Nelson.
It's weird.
Yeah, I know the standings and how all that works out for your future opponents. That's just how it's gone. But no, they seem to play each other a lot. Nelson versus Heyward is always a great matchup. I'm really looking forward when it comes to the Colts. Josh Downs, that is who Anthony Richardson has had the most chemistry with throughout their young careers. But Downs, missed some time early. He made his debut last week. He had a high ankle sprain in training camp. So he just got back last week. That is, I think, the guy that is going to be the difference between Anthony Richardson finally smoothing out some of those rough edges, getting that completion percentage up, moving the chains, just taking those layups that I mentioned. They really need Josh Downs to get more involved now that he's back. This will be his second week. I think working him back into the offense will be a big deal. One thing I'm definitely confident in, these two teams are very different than the 30-13 game last December. I mean, shoot, the Colts' whole backfield, it was Jonathan Taylor wasn't in that one. Anthony Richardson wasn't in that one. This is going to be a much, much different game.
It is. Both teams, I think are a lot healthier. And everyone's dealing with injuries. It's part of the game. But these are different times. The Steelers at that time, they were trying Mitch Trubisky at quarterback because Kenny Pickett had gotten hurt and things weren't going too well. They would bench Mitch Trubisky at the end of that game and get in Mason Rudolph, who would lead them to the playoffs. And now you're a bit more confident in Justin Fields. Can the Colts rock the boat at quarterback again? I think that's going to be their goal, just as the Steelers are going to try to rock the boat on Anthony Richardson. I think it's going to be a fun physical game where I like these games. I don't like pure rock fights where there's no scoring. But when there's physical football, running backs hitting their gaps, smart play action being used for quick timing windows, passing windows, I think that there's a lot to be learned from games like that, and especially in today's NFL where defenses are starting to catch up to what offenses have been doing for the last 10 years or so.
No, I think this will be a good football purists matchup. As long as, Pittsburgh has done a good job with this, but as long as the Colts aren't sloppy and making a bunch of mistakes, I think it'll be a good one to watch.
Thanks for tuning in for another Crossover Thursday episode here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Thanks again to Jake Arthur for being a great co-host on the show and doing a great episode here. We hope that you enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed this, remember you can check out this show on all your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to the channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes as well as our bonus content. Thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. Tomorrow, we're going to be back previewing final looks at the Steelers. We'll take a closer look at this injury report, which is pretty long on Wednesday. We will see how long it is after Thursday's practice and see just where the Steelers need to be to win and advance to 4-0 as they head into the rest of the season. Check it out here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.